comes out, again, not to issue a statement, but to say, you know, she wants to see the election schedule for the next parliamentary election announced as soon as possible. So, you know, unprecedented American interference. Now, in this edition is very critical, very important. I'm going to discuss this, but I'm also going to give you the wider perspective. A lot of things are happening. We don't have proof on everything. There are lots of conspiracy theories, a lot of media reports. We don't have proof on everything, but we can see a trail of events. We can see a trail of events, and we can, any intelligent person, any intelligent analyst can put these things together and read certain things, where things are going. And we're going to do this in this edition, and joining me is Mr. Zaid Hamid, who's the founding consultant for Brass Tacks, which is a prominent premier Pakistani security and defense analysis group based here in Islamabad. Thank you very much, Zaid, for joining us.
Thank you, Ahmed, for having me.
Zaid, my very first question is this. Why this unprecedented American interest in seeing Mrs. Benazir Bhutto in power in Islamabad simultaneously with seeing President Musharraf weakened? And is this just a normal American interest in seeing the triumph of democracy, or is there something more to it?
No, there's much more sinister to it. Let me be very frank here. You see, what has been happening in the last 4 years particularly is that Americans have been pushing President Musharraf on 5 or 6 strategic points. 5 or 6 strategic points which affect US foreign policy in Central Asia, Asia, Eurasia, and Far East for the 21st century, and in the greater Middle East as well. For example, Americans have been pushing him to hand over Dr. A.Q. Khan. He has not done it. For whatever reasons, he has not done it. Americans have been pushing him to hand over whatever Pakistan knows about the North Korean nuclear program. Pakistan have not done it. Americans have been pushing him to roll back Pakistan's nuclear and missile program. He has not done it. Americans have been pushing him to break off relationships with Iran. He has not done it. Break off relationships with Afghanistan. He has not done it. And as well, at the same time, Americans have been pushing him to go head-on into the tribal areas, literally rolling over our own people there, while the government has been steady, trying to make deals, trying to understand the environment there and go slow. And go slow on our own tribes, but going very harsh on the militants there. So these factors which Americans feel, and in fact, and also the President Musharraf did not recognize Israel, and he did not send forces to Iraq. So there are multiple, all these elements.
But President Musharraf did actually allow his foreign minister to shake hands with the Israeli foreign minister.
Cosmetics. In reality, Israel was never allowed access into Pakistan. Pakistan never recognized them, and Israel, despite the fact that they are so desperate to have access into this area, and still they haven't. So these are the things that Americans wanted someone else to deliver now. For the Americans, I've said this before as well, the President Musharraf has run out of his useful life for them. And they want a more pliant, more compliant, or more soft leader here who, under the facade of democracy, would be able to deliver them these goals. And obviously, I don't want to go against anybody in particular, but we have heard noises and sounds and statements coming from so many sources which confirm that whoever they want to replace with President Musharraf would be more than willing to assist them in those.
No, let me, if you allow me to interrupt here, Zaid, before you go on to your next points, just a quick interruption. What I understand from what you just said is, what he basically, I mean, you know, the critics of President Musharraf basically accuse him, among many other things, of being an American stooge. I mean, that's the word they use for him. From your analysis here, what you're telling me is that despite being in cahoots and very close to Washington and Washington's policy in the region, President Musharraf actually resisted Washington on these points?
This is what has happened is, there is one aspect of President Musharraf which is so close to the Americans that it is actually disturbing. I'll be very honest, it's very disturbing at certain aspects. But on the other hand, he is so adamant to the Americans, he's so defiant to the Americans, that's disturbing for the Americans. And this is where he is trying to juggle and balance his relationship, because he cannot compromise Pakistan's relationship with China or Iran or Pakistan's nuclear program or Dr. A.Q. Khan or Pakistan's North Korean initiative or whatever, or the war against religious terrorism, for example, in Pakistan. What the Americans are saying is that President Musharraf should have done more, and on the grounds of religious terrorism. And whoever they want to replace with, they would be saying is they should be going faster into this area of religious terror or fighting the religious extremism. I can very safely say, as a professional analyst, no one, no ruler in Pakistan can go more faster than what already President Musharraf is doing. In fact, he's suicidal. What he has done is he has thrown caution to winds, he has endangered in certain, he has harmed Pakistan's own interest in so many places. That's what I said. This is a disturbing aspect of it. In fact, he should slow down, very slow down. He should reevaluate the whole strategy, take the national parliament into confidence, take the nation into confidence, take the religious clergy, media, think tank, society, civil society on board instead of taking independent decisions now on this aspect.
But there are some analysts who are saying, Zaid, that with the imposition of emergency, basically I wouldn't say he's doing exactly what you just mentioned, but he has actually, I don't know, thrown cold water maybe on Washington's plans, the things that they were going, I mean, the direction.
This is exactly what he has done, you see, because basically their worst nightmare for the Americans is to delay of elections, if these elections are postponed, because if the elections are postponed, then their candidate would not be coming in here. So this is obviously, and once President Musharraf gives them the assurance that elections will be held on time, all the fuss you're hearing about emergency would simply cool off. And already the signs are that it is.
Okay, my next question is maybe comes within the, some people might describe it as a conspiracy theory, but there are some people who are saying that in order to pressure the Pakistani leadership, President Musharraf, into a certain direction, the elections and so forth, and allowing that candidate that he just mentioned, in order to put that kind of pressure, internal and external pressures have been put on the president. And I'm not just talking about diplomatic pressures, I'm talking about things on the ground, boots on the ground, things in our borders, things that are happening in our tribal areas in the north of Pakistan. Tell me about that. I mean, what's your assessment of that?
You see, whatever is happening in our tribal areas, and now from that arc we move into Swat Valley also, is highly suspicious. It's very highly suspicious. Starting up from Balochistan, when we talk of the insurgency of the Balochistan Liberation Army, we know for sure, it's on record, absolutely without any doubt, that they are based in Afghanistan, in Kabul. Their operations are taking place from that area. All the world have declared BLA as a terrorist outfit except the Americans.
The so-called Balochistan Liberation
Army. They are protecting them. Why? This is one signal. Second thing is, Afghanistan has become such a haywire free country. There's absolutely every intelligence agency in the world, particularly Mossad, particularly Khat, particularly RAW, particularly CIA, MI6, and they can operate with impunity. And absolutely there's no check on what is happening in Afghanistan now.
But it's supposed to be under American control, Afghanistan.
See, Iraq is also supposed to be under American control. But what is happening? See, there are two countries that invaded by, post 9/11 invaded by the Americans. I'll give you the example of Iraq first. Iraq is under the American control. Turkey is the American ally. But the American policies in Iraq have created a state in which the dismemberment of Turkey is threatened. And the Kurdish state is being created, and Turks took it such an offense at that. They actually threatened to launch military operations inside northern Iraq in Kurdistan. And they complained to Israel because
disturbing the American plans.
Disturbing the American plans, and the Israeli military advisors were training the Kurds who were attacking Turkey. And Turkey have a relationship with Israel.
And they protested to Israel.
And they protested to Israel on that.
Turkey,
So it's something very haywire is happening. What is happening is that the American game plan in the greater Middle East is actually at the cost of its allies, Turkey and Pakistan. In Turkey, they want Greater Kurdistan, which is basically going to take a chunk of territory from Iran and a chunk of territory from Iraq. In this area, the American game plan, which if you just look at this map, which the Armed Forces Journal of the Americans released, and they say we have got nothing to do with this, it's just an academic document. No, but the academic document is
I think
actually
it was published by the U.S. Defense Journal, Armed Forces Journal. Yeah.
But whatever they say is actually happening on ground. Turkey is invading Iraq.
Well, why don't you just show the map again? I mean, just to see the exactly. I mean, this is the actual map. Let me just show it here from this camera. I mean, we can see on top, first of all, the existing map. I mean, this is the existing map. And if you go down, you see the after, the before and after. The after one shows, of course, the same map with changed boundaries, the same countries with different boundaries. And this was published by the U.S. Armed Forces Journal, which is the magazine published by the U.S. Army and by some American analysts, of course. Yeah, go ahead.
So, and in this region,
where of course our western regions are shown to be part of Iran
and Pakistan's western regions on the Indus line, two changes have been shown in the Pakistani map. One is the Greater Balochistan. Balochistan is an autonomous state. Second, the entire west side of Indus joining up with Afghanistan. And this is what we call is the creation of Pashtunistan. See what has been, and interestingly, for the first time, even American papers like Newsweek have been talking about creation of Pashtunistan.
Now, wait. This is very amazing because, in the middle of the emergency position, everybody thought that, that all the media was focusing on the emergency, and suddenly this magazine comes out with, a report saying that everything that is happening in Pakistan's tribal areas basically is leading to Pashtunistan. The viewers can see a page glimpse of the article itself.
You see, this is very stunning for the analysts who are based in Pakistan and observing these developments, because for the last 60 years, we have heard of sub-nationalist movements in Pakistan who are secular-based. Like we have talked of Sindhu Desh, we have heard of Jinapur, we have heard of Baluchistan, independent Baluchistan, we have heard of Pashtunistan. And Pashtun sub-nationalists who have been striving to cut exactly on the same lines, they have been talking of cutting Pakistan west of Indus line, joining it into Afghanistan, into autonomous regions of Pashtunistan, have been backed by Soviet Russia. But now, we found the same Pashtun sub-nationalist elements, just like Balochistan sub-nationalist elements, joining hands with the Americans. It's in a stunning move where American press is also for the first time in the last 60 years talking of Pashtunistan. So what's going on here? Is it exactly the same scenario that, or at the cost of Turkey, they are creating a greater Kurdistan, and here at the cost of Pakistan, they're trying to create a greater Pashtunistan? There is some kind of sinister nonsense going on.
But in our case, Zed, the leadership of this so-called BLA, this terrorist outfit, you're accusing the Americans, but I see them really residing in Kabul. And it's Karzai, and it's the Northern Alliance, and it's maybe the Indians, I don't know.
See, the Kurdish are also living under the American occupation. They are being protected, patronized, trained, given money, equipment, supplies, and Israelis as well. And there are confirmed reports of Israeli presence in Afghanistan as well. And another thing, the religious radicals in Pakistan, this is a very important point that I need to make here. The religious radicals of extremists of all kinds in Pakistan Pakistan have been facing them. There's one common factor amongst them all. They have never been against the federation and state of Pakistan. And they were never separatists. They were never sub-nationalists. They were never somebody who wanted to dismember Pakistan. In fact, Pakistan was created on the ideology of Islam.
So they support that.
And they support that. And what the demand was implementation of Sharia laws within the geographic boundaries of Pakistan. Nobody ever said dismember Pakistan.
But now, what do you
This is for the first time in two places we are seeing this thing development. One is Baitullah Masood, he's doing it in Waziristan. And other is Mullah Fadlullah, he's doing it in Sawat. Just 2 days ago in Sawat, areas under his control, he burned down Pakistani flag, he raised his own flags, and he declared himself as the leader, Amir al-Mu'mineen of the tribal area, of those regions. Basically, a complete declaration of independence. Now, this is stunning. Similarly, Baitullah Masood. Now, Baitullah Masood again is an extremely suspect character. Our sources really confirm to us that Taliban are also suspicious of him because he's not under the Taliban influence anymore. Afghan Taliban have never declared, Mullah Umar have never declared war on Pakistani state. He still understands the difference between government policies and the state of Pakistan. He makes a distinction between the two. Where this line has been crossed, in South Waziristan particularly, is that Baitullah Masood is using satellite telephones. He's using high technology communication equipment. It should be a 5-minute job for the Americans to track where the man lives, where he exists.
And they're our friends. They can give us that information.
They're supposed to be our friends, and they're supposed to give us the intel on that. But when they're protecting the BLA separatists in Kabul, there's a very strong suspicion, as an analyst that I have, that they are protecting Baitullah Masood for certain sinister reasons.
Okay. Well, before you continue, we have a quick commercial break. Let's go for that break, and we'll be back. We'll join you after this. Okay, we're back. Now, Zaid, you were talking about Sawat and Baitullah Masood, and you have your strong suspicions that he's actually being protected by the same people who are also protecting the leadership of the separatist BLA in Kabul, which happens to be also under American control and administration. Anyway, now Sawat, because that's the latest development. People say that Sawat is basically, the problem is Sawat is part and parcel of ours, Pakistan's, Afghan policy, because we turned against the Taliban, and so they're taking their revenge, and they're creating trouble for us in Sawat. What's your take?
That's nonsense.
Why is that?
Sawat problem started in 1996 when the Sufi Muhammad first declared Sharia. supposedly took over that area and rebelled against the state of Pakistan. There was no 9/11 then, there was no Afghan policy then, there was no problem in our tribal areas, there was no US invasion of Afghanistan. So how could Swat problem have got to do anything with Pakistan's Afghan policy? It started in 96. The cancer was continuing. The gangrene stayed. Now, post 9/11, the Sufi Muhammad took thousands of his followers into Afghanistan. He took them into Afghanistan, abandoned them all, came back alone with a few followers, and got rest of them slaughtered inside. And basically, that was the end of the problem in the Swat insurgency. The Swat problem was completely resolved then.
Right.
Sufi Muhammad himself begged to the government for protection. He said, please keep me in custody because the people back home are going to kill me because I've got hundreds of their sons killed in Afghanistan and I've abandoned them and I've come back. And the government actually took him in protection.
So where does that came from, Fadlullah?
So the issue of Swat was actually dead for the last 6 years. It just developed in the last 8 months, 9 months. How come? What are the linkages? Swat's issues, the latest issue of Swat actually flared up after the Lal Masjid crisis in Islamabad. Fadlullah was a teacher in Lal Masjid. And right now, hundreds of his supporters who are fighting with him in Swat are those militants who have been released by the government from Lal Masjid.
By the former Supreme Court
without getting into the details,
panel of judges.
But the unfortunate problem is that without debriefing them, without making sure, without taking guarantees from the tribes and parents that they would not involve into militant activity, they were let loose, and now we are creating problems there. But now, I'll come to some more details onto that. Fazlullah is also son-in-law of Sufi Muhammad. So they are related also. Their relationship is also there. And Fazlullah is the only mainland religious radicals who had declared an autonomous state within the state of Pakistan. As I said, he raised his own flag, burned down Pakistani flag, called himself Amir al-Mu'mineen, and now they are trying to take over the valley. But the strength of Fazlullah and his followers in Swat is highly exaggerated in media. They are in hundreds, not in thousands. Part one. Part two, Swat is a closed valley. From Pakistan, the territory of Pakistan is all around it. They are not connected with Afghanistan. It's not a problem like Waziristan there. In Waziristan, there are hundreds of small and big, large groups, various clans, tribes, sub-clans, which are operating there, which have their own militias, armed group. In Swat, there's only one TNSM, Tehreek-e-Nafaz Sharif Muhammad. There's only one center of gravity. When these people started their rebellion, Indians started to write in their own think tanks. The Indian secret services and intelligence agencies started to write very blatantly, and recently we are seeing their press releases which speaks of their overconfidence about the subject, is that they have talked of having their assets within the militants who are listening to Pakistan Army chatter. I mean, these are the exact words.
Now, before you continue, I just want to tell the viewers, because this was going to be one of my questions, so just let me tell the viewers here, that basically what Zaid just referred to right now are two reports that were released by Indian sources. One was by an Indian website, I believe, Zaid, and it's actually a very well-known think tank, and it has an internet presence. And they basically said in one of their analyses on what's going on in our tribal regions that they have their assets, and actually you can see a quote actually on the screen right now from one of those websites, that they have equipment on the ground and assets who are actually listening in on the communication of Pakistan Army units in our tribal regions. That's one. And the second is very open, actually. It happened over the weekend. The Directorate of Military Operations in the Indian Army itself released information that, according to their sources on the ground inside Pakistan, tested sources and credible sources, Pakistani Army has moved some of soldiers from the LOC with India to our tribal areas, a thing that Pakistan has denied. So the Indians are basically saying, as you just mentioned, Zaid, you can continue with that they're listening to us.
So what happens is all the signs that we are getting, the religious groups never declare war against Pakistan, Fazlullah has. Religious groups do not want to dismember Pakistan, he has. They don't burn down Pakistani flag and declare themselves Amir al-Mu'mineen, he has. They also have equipment which is military specifications, which Pakistan Army does not have. So where did he get that from? They're not available in open market.
How do you know about this?
You see, because they are using communication equipment which Pakistan Army can't hear. And they are listening to Pakistan Army's communication. So they definitely have equipment which is much more sophisticated than we have. And Indians, when they are saying they've got assets on ground who are listening to Pakistan Army chatter within the militants. And also the fact that the beheading of Pakistan paramilitary forces and police which took place there was so repulsive, and the whole people of Swat, who are peace-loving, patriotic Pakistanis of the settled area, they were repulsed by what they saw, what happened there. And those militants then suddenly denied doing it and even acknowledge having foreign elements present in their ranks who must have done it. This is the statement from the militants who said it. And then after that, the militants Sadlullah tried to behave well and nice and started to release those paramilitary forces and troops and the police.
In fact, he released a statement, or he had somebody release a statement saying that, you know what, I think it's not right. It's maybe some of my overzealous activists who might have done it.
And also that there must be foreign elements amongst us who must have done it.
True.
So these signs make us very, very suspicious of what is happening in Swat. Swat Valley has, the problem is nothing, if you look at their demand.
Are you suspicious that Swat, what's happening there? I mean, Swat is our link to our northern part of the country, which is adjacent, joining China. I mean, are you suspicious of them?
You see, the thing is...
Actually, let me rephrase that, Zaid. Are you suspicious that since 2004, when we've actually entered the final phases of our very ambitious project linking Gwadar, Arabian Sea, all the way to China's border. I mean, we're aggressively have begun working on this. You know, there's the national trade corridor that the Prime Minister Shawkat Aziz is working on, the NTC, western areas of China all the way to Gwadar, and we've started really entering the final phases of that. You know, and partially with the help of our Chinese friends. And suddenly, this entire area goes up in flames.
You see, this is very suspicious, again, because the Chinese are being targeted everywhere. Even today, it was the news in the paper that Pakistan has evacuated almost every Chinese engineer working in the NWFP province. Religious groups do not target Chinese. The Chinese are being targeted in Pakistan in those areas which are either controlled by BLA or by Baitullah Masood or by Fadlullah, threatened in the areas controlled by Fadlullah, or even in northern Afghanistan, Kunduz, the area controlled by Northern Alliance. So everywhere where we find signatures of people being in anti-Pakistan bloc, they are trying to create a rift between Pakistan and China. This is a very serious matter for Pakistan's relationship with China, and this is something that Pakistan cannot take lightly.
Okay, Zaid, we're almost out of time. Let this be my last question, but it's a wholesome question actually. But we are limited time now. What is the? I mean, you've just explained it all. We have the picture now, the wider perspective. What is the American role in all of this? And you know, we'll try to do it within the time.
American role, as I said, is, to put it simply, is strange. To put it bluntly, is sinister. You see, because what they are doing is they are trying to expand their agenda in in Central Asia and Greater Middle East at our cost, exactly as they're doing at the cost of Turkey. I mean, see, after all, Turkey is offended by the U.S. policies in Iraq.
I like the way they responded, actually.
and Americans, whatever their agenda in Central Asia is, which is against Iran, which is against Central Asia, which is against China, but for reasons best known to them, if they want to extend Afghanistan to our Indus border and talk about creation of Pashtunistan, then what they are doing is a hostile act of war against Pakistan. That's not something. And again, I remember here the statement by the former president of Pakistan, Ayub Khan. He says, to being enemy of United States is dangerous, but to be their friends is fatal.
Okay,
so I guess this is something that we Pakistanis should now reconsider.
Be careful about it. And I hope, of course, I'm sure that people concerned are watching. And there you go. I mean, this gives you the answer to, you know, the $10 billion that the American media keeps repeating, you know, that they've given us over the past 5 years. In return for that, this is the kind of mess that we in Pakistan, in this region, we find ourselves in. You know, it's part of being part of the whole American strategy, the war on terror. That's the price. That's the kind of price that we have to pay. I'm sure this is a subject that we're going to continue discussing, and I'm confident my viewers will be seeing more of you also in the future.
My last statement would be, I think it is time that we should very seriously consider our Afghan policy. It's time we do that.
Yeah, you mentioned that before, I think once before. And as a matter of fact, we'll discuss this as well also in the future. Now, you have to stay put because we'll come, of course, in the next segment, and we'll continue this discussion in this edition where we're trying to focus, of course, on our relationship with the United States in the background, of course, of the American response to the imposition of emergency powers. Thank you, Zaid, again for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, in the first segment, we talked very openly about how the Pakistanis and the Americans have been good friends for quite a long time. We know them, they know us, we know each other's weaknesses and strengths. And we've had ups and downs in this relationship. But now recently, of course, we've been hearing a lot, the U.S. media in particular, harping on the point that, with the $10 billion they paid us, somehow in the past 5 years, somehow they've bought us. And what they forget to mention is that we, in Pakistan, in exchange for that, have given the Americans the biggest footprint they could have never imagined in the energy-rich Central Asia. That's the other side of the coin, the other side of the sentence that they never complete when they mention the $10 billion. Anyway, in this segment, we're going to talk, of course, about the official, positions that we're hearing both from Islamabad and Washington on the pressures that we've been hearing about after the imposition of emergency in Pakistan. And I'm joined here in the studio by Senator Tariq Azim, the State Minister for Information and Broadcasting. Mr. Senator, thank you very much for joining us. I know you're very busy, and I had a hard time just pulling you in this studio, but thanks a lot for joining us. My first question, the announcement of the date that the elections would be held by the President would be held before 15 Feb. It's surprising that immediately after the telephone call from President Bush, this announcement comes forth. It's a clear impression, and I will be lying to you if I say otherwise. The impression is very clear. The President announced this under direct pressure from President Bush, from the American President. What's the truth, very frankly?
Before I come on to that, let me just say, in your intro you said $10 billion. You see, there is no free lunch. Nobody gives away $10 billion for nothing. We should always expect there must be some demand somewhere. So when somebody gives you $10 billion, doesn't matter how much they love you, they should expect some quid pro quo. So when they're asking things, I suppose, that we should have expected this. Now, coming to your thing that President Bush makes a telephone call, and then somehow we call a National Security Council meeting, and then President decides what he's going to do. That is not the fact. The fact of the matter is there is a pure coincidence. National Security Council meeting is a very important meeting. We have got all the chief ministers, all the governors, the speaker, the chairman of the Senate, the prime minister, everybody attends that meeting. Now, in order to get them together, you need a lot of forward planning. When these people will be free, when these dates are going to be available. So that meeting was planned long ago. So it wasn't the case that President Bush calls and immediately a meeting is called and you announce a date. That wasn't the case. And once they had met, they decided, but everybody expected that sooner or later, in a day or two, this announcement was bound to come. Because on the 15th of November, the National Assembly completes this term. So obviously we were not going to leave it after the 15th of November, but it had to come now.
Mr. Senator, you make a very strong argument when you say that the meeting of the National Security Council involves a lot of logistics, of course, all these important people coming, naturally the protocol and all. It couldn't have happened just simply on a call. I can see that to you. But I have another example. Just a couple of days back, the ambassador of the United States of America here to Pakistan, Madam Ann Patterson, visits the office of the Election Commission of Pakistan, meets the election commissioner, and she comes out. And it's not just me. Everybody noticed when she came out, she did not make a statement, which is the usual thing. No. She made what appeared to be like an order. She said, she expects the Election Commission of Pakistan to announce a date as soon as possible. In addition to that, of course, she also said we're putting pressure on the President, or President Musharraf, to get out of his uniform. So it just appears that there's, I don't know, it's just very strange. I don't think even with the kind of closeness we've had with the Americans, we've ever had a U.S. ambassador in Islamabad coming out and talking with such confidence about such a domestic, purely internal matter of ours.
I must be very honest with you. I did not actually see her make those statements. But what you say, if that is the case, I think perhaps these were things way over the limit for a diplomatic person to make that kind of remarks, if she did that. Because you see, the diplomatic norms are such that first of all you do not interfere a lot with your host country's internal issues. You may talk about the same issues but do it behind closed doors, so to speak. But these things are usually not said in public, certainly not in the terms that you just described.
True. Mr. Senator, there have been reports on and off that the United States might review sanctions and might introduce some sanctions, but nothing has come forth. Of course, we're seeing a lot of hue and cry from certain American politicians, particularly the Democrats, a lot of letters and things like that. But nothing concrete so far, which is positive, of course, for our relationship. And certainly I hear a lot of people in your government saying that, you know, naturally there's a good relationship, good understanding with the Bush administration. What's your take? I mean, how are you seeing this thing? I mean, the hot